I will say, I'm a really loud rock drummer, so if there's a time to put your earplugs in, it's now. If you cover your ears, I won't be offended. I may judge you slightly, but no, I'm kidding. It'll be loud, but hope you dig it. Thank you guys. Sorry about the snare drum. I left it off and then it kind of loosened, so that was kind of like a bit timbale-ish on that song. Little Saint Anger vibe going on. Okay. So that tune is a Better Stranger song. Shout out Joey. Anyways, so a concept that I kind of wanted to touch on with some of these tracks is kind of the concept of creating and playing in odd time. That song kind of goes a bit all over the place. So the core of the song is in 5 or 10, depending on how you want to count it. And then the chorus is in 7, the bridge or the pre-chorus is in 10, so bridge is in 6. So it does a bunch of other stuff. So I always kind of, my approach or mindset is how can I approach all these weird time signatures while trying to make it feel as comfortable for the listener and also like for me to feel like I'm actually playing music and not just playing to a number. I think that's the thing when people start doing or getting into odd time signatures is their immediate instinct is to look at what the number is and you start to almost play like a 4/4 groove except you're intentionally taking a beat out or you're adding a beat depending on what time signature it is. And I always said that the biggest thing that I learned from, touring with Genesis and tackling those complex time signatures was listening to the music, listening to the riffs, and trying to look out for any hooks or bits of music that you can latch onto that are either going to help you, if you're creating your part, it's going to help you hone in on what to do and what's going to maybe feel the best when it's actually talking to the other instruments. Or if you're learning it, it's gonna, finding the little kind of hints and the little tips and tricks throughout the song that are gonna like be able to kind of help ground yourself where you're like, okay, I know where we are because I know that this piece of music or this time signature has got, the keyboards are doing this or the drums, the bass or guitar are doing this. So with this stuff, since we're with Better Strangers, since we're like creating it in real time, a big thing has been listening to each other and playing off of each other in those odd time signatures. So maybe the verse was something that started off as a drum groove and the bass, the bass line followed that, but then when it went to the next section, it's the opposite. So it's always kind of keeping that kind of almost open dialogue in the rehearsal room to play off of each other and not just kind of be like, I need to play whatever time signature correctly, if that makes sense. So let's do another Better Strangers track, and this next one is a concept that's kind of piggybacking on the whole creativity side of things, which is the core of this drum groove on this upcoming song is basically a drum pattern that I split into a groove. And I think that's one of those things where it's an underrated kind of trick where all of a sudden it can inspire you to come up with new things, it can inspire your bandmates to come up with stuff. But basically I took this pattern, which was kind of a version, I'm sure there's a real name for it, but I always looked at it as a kind of version of a Bonham triplet, but you're just alternating the hands, so you're doing kick, left, right, kick, right, left. But I decided on this song to kind of orchestrate that between the hi-hat and the stack, which kind of helps create in this verse a bit of a kind of weird, chaotic push and pull, which I really like. So you'll kind of, if you pick up on that, since it's a triplet groove, it would naturally go be in 3 or 6, but I kind of add an extra kick to make it 4/4. So these are just kind of ideas. You can kind of do this with everything, with a bunch of exercises and drum fills. It's something that I started really taking from Mario Duplantier from Gojira, where he does a lot of songs, which is just, you know, drum exercises. But as soon as you orchestrate it around the kit, you'll be kind of surprised how much it opens up the vocabulary and how inspiring some of these things can be. So yeah, let's do another tip. you guys. So a lot of that is basically, yeah, we talked about that pattern. It kind of follows through on the bridge. There's like that tom groove that I was doing, which the start of it kind of starts with that same idea. And kind of my point with that is something that may start out as an exercise and start out as a cool chop or a cool fill. When you turn it into a groove and you orchestrate it differently, it can really lead into kind of inspiring a bunch of different ideas. So, you know, the kick being kind of a triplet feel on the verse inspired me having a constant triplet kick on the last chorus, for example. So you can kind of have fun with anything, and, you know, you'll also be surprised that sometimes it'll inspire maybe your bandmates to come up with something that's different because they're not just hearing a normal 2/4 classic drum beat. So despite it being in 4/4, despite it being, I think most of the songs at 150 BPM, you know, it is unique enough and different enough where maybe it makes you think of something else. So yeah, so that's that one. And so the next one that I wanted to go over, this is a tune that a friend of mine called Kaz Rodriguez wrote. I don't know if you guys know who Kaz is. He's a beast. He's an amazing drummer. Plays for Chaka Khan, Josh Grove, and a bunch of people. But he's also an amazing composer and writer. And a few weeks ago, or almost months ago at this point, I was doing the Sweetwater Clinic, the Sweetwater Drum Fest, and I was like, hey dude, can you send me, or can you make me a song? We had talked about doing something together, and he did. He made me a song, and he was like, all right, I went out there with the time signatures, and I kind of made it difficult for you. And I listened to it, I was like, dude, you made this way too difficult for me. Like, I just wanted to have fun and groove, and now I'm like actually having to learn a piece of music. But the reason I wanted to bring it up today was because this is a song that obviously, deals with a lot of time signatures, but my approach to learning a song, whether that's for a session or mainly a tour, when you're trying to learn a whole set list, the biggest thing that a drummer can do when you're being hired, I mean, I would say for any gig, if it's, you know, even if it's with your band or anything, but especially when you're being hired to do a job, is above like being able to play and, you know, having all the musical benefits that you would think of, the biggest thing that I found is the reliability and the professionalism that go a very long way, keeping a gig with being asked to do it again. And so for me, every gig that I've been asked to, you know, go to as a hired gun, I guess, I've always tried to go above and beyond with the practice time. And that goes aside from just the drum set. When you're kind of trying to learn a whole set or just a song, I would say make it part of your daily routine. Like, listen to it when you're maybe not behind the drum set, so that it doesn't just become muscle memory and you're not just, you know, wired towards what you're doing in the order that you're doing it. If you actually know the song, you start to pick up on more elements of the song, which is going to make you play more musically, but it's also going to allow you to know it inside out, where if something goes wrong or if the band wants to change something off the cuff, you're not like, oh my god, but verse 2 only happens at this point because that's how I've learned it. Like, you actually know the song and you know what they're talking about. You're actually more part of the musical experience. And that's one thing that I've always encouraged for drummers, and it's something that I remember Danny Carey saying is, you know, he's a drummer, he doesn't just play beats, he wants to be part of the musical experience and the musical composition. And that's always been something that I've tried to keep in mind, and I think that comes with obviously listening to your bandmates, but knowing the material, knowing the songs, and not just going there to just do a job and, like, you know, tick the box. Like, actually put the time in towards knowing what you're doing, knowing the material that you're playing, and then you'll find that not only does it go a long way for the whole band, but it'll go a long way with your comfort level when you're playing it. You can kind of be on autopilot because you know the song inside out. So yeah, basically this song is, you know, I'm still kind of figuring stuff out. I'm kind of playing around with different ideas and stuff. But it's one of those where when Kaz sent this to me, I was like, okay, this is, you know, I need to actually spend some time working on this. So yeah, this is a song called Collision by Kaz. figuring my way through that one. But yeah, so how are we doing time-wise? Dave, we got, how are we doing?
Maybe it's 3:30, maybe 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's do another tune. What to do? Okay. Let's see what happens. All right, I'm gonna do this one, and it is a Other Better Stranger song, and we'll see how it goes. It's a song that basically it revolves around a sticking pattern, and the sticking pattern is pretty somewhat straightforward. It was felt kind of natural, but it kind of piggybacks on the whole idea of expanding on kind of different grooves and ideas. So I'll play you really quickly what the sticking pattern is, and then kind of show you what's going on from there. Also, snares are off, so it's going to be kind of a bit more tribal Danny Carey vibe. So, yeah. So the sticking pattern is right, left, left, right, left, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. That's so. Pretty straightforward, but basically what I'm doing is I'm doing it around the kit between the toms and the rototoms. Obviously, if you don't, like, it can be with any sort of, it's just, there's a lot of stuff here, so I get to kind of have fun and pick and choose what I want. So let me play that, and then I'll throw in what's happening on the kick, and then it starts to come together as a group. So. What I'm doing is like a triplet, kind of a 3 against 2 thing between the kick and the hi-hat. Downbeat on the open snare creates this really cool kind of tribal kind of drum pattern. And so this song started off kind of revolving around that, but then I kind of took the 3 against 2 thing, expanded it a bit further. So yeah, this song is called Ashes. Thank you guys, appreciate it. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of does it for some of the songs I have prepared. And kind of to piggyback on how I started that one, listen to your bandmates in any context, whether you're creating or just kind of playing with them. There's lots of things you can pick up on. A lot of what I'm doing in that song is direct response to either the bass or the guitar. So, yeah, whenever you feel kind of maybe stuck, uninspired, I hope that there's a couple kind of tips and advice that I gave today that maybe can help you kind of, you know, maybe create a new perspective on a part or something that you're working on. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys for coming. I don't know where Dave is. I don't know if we're doing questions or if we're doing the jams. Okay. Well, in the meantime, is there any questions that we have in the audience? Yes, go for it.
Who are your biggest influences?
Love the question, man. It's always fun to talk about. My biggest influences, I mean, the list goes on. It's constantly growing. Top 5, Danny Carey, John Bonham, Taylor Hawkins, and then it starts to get really tough. I'm just going to start listing out names as quickly as possible. Stuart Copeland, John Theodore from Mars Volta in Queens, Abe Cunningham, Gavin Harrison, Larnell Lewis from Snarky Puppy, he's a beast. I had this moment of realization yesterday that the best 3 drummers on planet Earth right now are Eloy Casagrande, Mario from Gojira, and Larnell Lewis. That was like, I came to that realization, I was like, that's a pretty solid top 3 going on. So yeah. And one more, we got another one? Yes?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you know, in rock, it seems like the music, at least for the drummer, is a lot more rehearsed, I guess. So, do you ever, when you're on stage playing a big gig, do you ever have that moment where you want to throw in a new fill or you want to improvise a bit, or you always kind of keep it regimented, like as it's playing? You know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that really depends on the gig that you're doing. If you're kind of doing like a hired gig, it's kind of based on, depending on what's expected of you from the band. So when I was doing the Genesis tour, it was never kind of set to me, but I kind of went in there being like, all right, I'm obviously gonna put my spin on it because of who, like, I'm just another human being, I'm not my dad. But I know that there's a bunch of people showing up to these shows who want to hear the certain versions of the songs and they want those big fills. So I always tried to keep it, you know, maybe combining stuff from a live version and a record, but try to keep it consistent. Also, when you're dealing with those really complex time signatures, you don't want to throw off the band where they know what they want to hear or what's been played in rehearsal. So if you just do a whole different fill, maybe it kind of throws them off. But with Mike and the Mechanics, it's a way more of a pop rock gig, but that was one where Mike was like, hey, if you know the songs, you know the structures, play whatever you want each night. I mean, you know, naturally you start to kind of lean into doing a lot of the same things over and over again because maybe that's what works the best for the song. But it kind of depends on, you know, kind of the gig. With Better Strangers recently, we've started putting jams in our songs, which we kind of know where we want to get to and how it's supposed to end up, but we don't really, you know, how we get there is kind of different every single time. And that's been really fun. It was really challenging at first because I haven't been improvising on stage or like in a set, you know, in years because I've been just, you know, doing the tours and playing to, some of the tours playing to a click. So it's been really fun to kind of get out there. So I would say it kind of depends. I always try to keep it a bit fresh if there's something that you think needs updating, but also there's nothing wrong. If, you know, if something works, then don't fix it, you know what I mean? So yeah, depends on the gig, I'd say.
Yeah, we're going to bring Paul. There's a gentleman here by the name of Paul Quinn, and I'm going to ask the other guys to come up here as well. We'll do a little bit of a question and answer. Paul is a business consultant and a great drummer, a entertainment attorney. Okay, so if you're looking to get a record contract or a record deal or dealing with management companies or want to do this for a living one day, he's the guy. But he's also going to ask us what he's part of the session panel, which is this amazing thing that interviews people. And we'll take some more questions and he'll actually lead some of this as well. But first, I want to also thank, how many people here are students? That's awesome. And I want to thank you guys for coming out on the Saturday. I know you could be doing a lot of stuff, and I want to thank, Nick for coming out. Just everybody. These are the things that I did when I was younger that I went to that inspired me to this very day. So I'll give you Paul.
Hey everybody, how's everyone doing?
Good.
Hey, now, I've been asked by Dave to do this in an English accent, so you'll think I'm more intelligent. So I'm going to work on that. So I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, how many people here are interested in actually having a career in the music industry? Okay, that's great, right?
I know you are.
Because there are some other things you have to know, right? Because not everybody can play like Nick. Not everybody can play like Dave. Now, I'm not suggesting you don't practice your 10,000 hours and remember what your teachers say, 30 minutes a day, right, no matter what. And I was a touring drummer for 20 years, so 20 minutes a day, okay, 30 minutes a day, an hour a day, even better. But you've also got to know some other things, and those are things that you can practice daily in your everyday existence, because all these guys will tell you, when you're on the road, you're on stage for an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 45 minutes, every day, maybe every 3 days. All the rest of the time, you're on a bus, you're in a hotel, you're with people, right? So it doesn't matter if you're the greatest player in the world. If you're a jackass on the remaining 23 hours a day, no one is going to hire you, right? And so being on time, being prepared, being professional, and I know this sounds corny, but being kind, right? Being a good hang, being somebody that's nice to be around is what gets you the gig. So I'll tell you, I toured Australia as a very young man with a Manchester, England punk poet, a guy by the name of John Cooper Clarke. And I did not get the gig because I was the best drummer in Manchester. I promise you that is not the case. And he was told that. Why do you want to tour with this guy? He's not the best guy we can get for the tour. And he said, because he's cool and he's easy to hang around. That's the key. And you can practice that every day. Kindness, right, is an important trait. And I know the music business can be cutthroat, but being kind will get you more work than you can imagine. Now, don't get me wrong, you still got to be able to hit 2 and 4 in the right place. Well, they're still not hiring you, no matter if you're the nicest human in the world. But I'm sure Nick will agree, I'm sure Dave will agree, maybe they won't, but I'm pretty sure they will, that hang on the bus, that time spent with your fellow musicians is what keeps you working. So my goal, especially for anyone that's still in school, practice being kind, right? High schools are traditionally not very friendly places. I'm a father, my kids are both out of high school now, but not the friendliest place, not the coolest place, cliquey, difficult. Be the kind guy, be the kind girl. Be someone that's there for everybody else, because when you get that reputation, that's the reputation that you'll follow through your professional career. So,
I just want to add, you can try to paint a picture of yourself that you want everybody to see, but you don't own your reputation. Other people, their perception of you, that's your reputation. And you can spend years building it up and blow it. And when you blow it, sometimes you never get that back. So,
there's a drummer I've been privileged to work with in the past, a drummer called Steve Gadd, who told me early on in my career, he said, it is easier to build a brand new reputation than to fix a bad one. Once you're down and registered as somebody that's difficult, it's really hard to pull that back. It's true. So I wanted to ask a couple of other questions. Jay, do you want to come up here too? There he is. Because, there are some musicians we run into who have unbelievable talent, right? Incredible efficiency on their instrument, and And Jay is clearly one of those people. Clearly one of those people, and has that reputation within the industry. You know, not just for being a great musician, but for being a good guy to hang around. Dave too. Nick is young, right? Nick is young, but first impressions, right? You only get one chance to make a first impression. Everybody I know that's ever run into Nick, and I've only run into him twice before today, has said, "Oh, he's great. He's so cool. He's easy to hang out with." And it helps that he can play his butt off too, right? So, I think if you go into, and you're successful in your career, you're still going to be seeing Nick touring with people in 20 years, 25 years. I want to add one other thing about the playing though, because how joyous is it to be able to play songs in 7s and 10s and 5s? That is just a skill that everybody, especially all the drummers, should absolutely work on being able to do. But I'm going to give you a little piece of advice. If you can't play a really good tight 2 and 4, you're never going to get a job. So before you work on the 7s, 9s, and 11s, and the 19s, if you can't play a good solid bass drum on 1 and 3, snare drum on 2 and 4, that feels good. And by feels good, I mean go listen to Steve Ferroni. Go listen to Steve Jordan. Listen to Jeff Porcaro, right? And listen to Steve Gadd. And listen to what they play and realize that you can play the part they're playing, but it doesn't sound like that. Why is that? And I couldn't agree more with what Jay said before, by the way. It's all about feel. Feel, having the right feel, making it feel good. Why do drummers get paid? They get paid for that moment when you see an audience going like this.
Get up and dance.
That's the drummer that does that, right? And that's what you've got to be able to do. But after you've done all that, and after you've mastered that, work on the 7s, 5s, 11s, and 3s.
But when you do that, approach it with the same mindset of trying to make it feel okay, and feel good. Because sometimes signatures, they're doomed. They'll never feel that great because you're doing it in 17, 16 or whatever it is. But most of the time, if you've got it, even if it's in 5, 9, or 7, you still got to approach it with that same kind of intention of it's got to be good for a listener. I mean, some bands go out there and they make it more for the music nerds, but I would say, as a drummer especially, groove has always been the biggest part of any song or band that I like.
It's all about the groove. Everything is about the groove. The groove is what makes you feel good. It's all about the groove. And I don't care if you're a drummer or a guitar player or a keyboard player or a bass player. It's all about the groove. You will all have to groove.
I just want to add something that I learned pretty early on when I started playing out in New York. Is, I was doing some gigs and doing a very high-end classic function, and it's not just the feel, but it's what you're playing. It's like just because you could doesn't mean you should. And what I mean by that is I was playing a high-end function, and it was at the Plaza Hotel or something like that. And whenever we were playing Miami Sound Machine, I was playing all these fusion chops and just playing every single note that I possibly could, and filling in and showing off. And we had a little break, and a guy came over to me, the band leader, and was like, if I wanted Dave Weckl, I would have hired Dave Weckl. I would have come up with the money. Trust me, I would have found the money to get Dave Weckl. But I don't want Dave Weckl on the gig. I want you to think about what I just said. And that's it. And right down in there, I was like, it was crystal clear what he told me. But it's also, I had to say, I'm playing for the wrong gig. I was playing for myself. I was playing to impress a bunch of guys that were older than me in New York City that were very established, and I was doing it the wrong way. And I learned that on that gig, they hired me simple. They hired me to make people dance. They hired me to make people nod their head. They hired me to play a bossa nova when we had to play soft, and not play bossa nova like I was playing, 50 blocks down at the Blue Note.
Yeah, nobody cares.
You know, it's like, yeah, except for other drummers. You know, if you're trying to impress them, that's great. But you know, everyone else is like, dude, I'm not tapping my foot. Can you just play time and make it happen? You know, and
That's a
used to
brilliant
have,
point.
so years ago, the story went, Vinny Colaiuta Sting used to say, like in those sessions when Vinny was playing, he would just, you know, he'd lean in, press the talk back, and go, dude, save that for your own record. Save that for your own record. That's not what you're here to do, you know. Which is that's what they do. And by the way, I just have to say this to you. The other funny little joke that went around, Hugh Patchen, we have worked together a little bit, and so he had those stories. But the other story he had was your dad was in the studio, and somebody pushed the talkback mic after a take and said, how does that feel, Phil? How did that feel, Phil? Something like, I can't even say it right. Anyway, okay, done with the jokes, go ahead.
But that's a brilliant point. And listen, there is a tendency sometimes to play for if you're a drummer, to play for the drummers in the audience. Never do that. Never do that. Now, listen, I say that, and I bet everyone here at some stage has done that. So I remember playing a gig in Ybor City years and years and years ago, and I had some friends coming through town, and they'd all said, oh, well, you know, we're going to come in and see you. So I didn't expect them to turn up. But halfway through the first set, I look out and I can see Casey Grillo, who's the drummer with Queensryche, great friend, old client of mine. Stanton Moore, who's a great groovy drummer from New Orleans, was in town with Galactic, and John Blackwell from Prince's band. And I was privileged enough to actually produce John's first solo record. So those three guys are there, and I'm playing a gig that's 2 and 4. And overwhelmingly, I'm like, I have to play busier. I have to do more. I shouldn't have done that, you know? But you do it anyway. Don't play for the drummers in the audience, because most people in the audience are not drummers. Unless you land the gig with Steely Dan and Toto, then everyone in the audience is a great musician anyway. But, if you land that gig, though, you've done pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off what you said, and I've kind of thought about where I have moments, I mean, it happens almost every day, where you go on Instagram and you see like the most ridiculous, I mean, you know, you got the guys in the world of like Matt Gartzka, Thomas Lang, these amazing musicians, but I just mean sometimes you go on Instagram and there's some like, you know, 11-year-old kid who's way better than I'll ever be, you know what I mean? And you're just like, oh my God, I've got to like, you know, because they're doing all these crazy chops. And sometimes I think it's important to pause and remember, why are you playing music? Why are you playing drums? Because that answer can kind of determine the path that you go on and the things that you really start to work on. So some people want to be the guy who plays on all the records. So what skill set are you going to need to do that? Some people want to be the fastest guy on planet Earth. And that's totally fine. Those are just two completely different paths where you're going to focus on different things. And for me, I find myself really always having to kind of, you know, go back to basics and being like, all right, I'm getting carried away with what I'm seeing on Instagram, what these crazy guys, what's my favorite stuff? Like, what do I look for in a drummer? You know what I mean? And kind of remembering what it is that actually gets you excited about it, instead of just trying to impress and do stuff. Like, it's cool to you know, when you can do it, but it can never be the main focus and the main point, I guess.
And I think if you want to work as a musician, be a musician, don't be an instrumentalist, right? So the most important thing you're ever going to do is support the song, right? The song is the key, the song is what sells, so you're going to play the best part for the song. Now, I'm in a minority amongst some people because I think Ringo Starr is one of the greatest drummers in history. I think he's one of the greatest. And the reason is because every part he plays is perfect for the song. So I don't know who your favorite drummers might be. You know, maybe you love Matt Gartzka, maybe you love Vinny Colaiuta, maybe you love Taylor Hawkins. If any of those guys had played in the Beatles wouldn't have sounded any better, even though technically I'm sure they're better players. But so play for the song, be a musician. Now, I'm going to bail imminently so these guys can play music, because that's what you came for. But I want to make one other suggestion. Don't only be a musician, but play with other musicians. Don't play with other instrumentalists. play with musicians, and play with the best musicians that you can find. Music is a language, right? And we learn a language in many different ways, but most we learn by listening and by copying, right? You want to listen and copy to the best guys you can play with. I mean, Dave Weckl is one of the greatest drummers that's ever picked up drumsticks. I mean, musically, technically, all over. So let me say, Jay,
I didn't know you said that.
I probably told him. Did playing with Dave make you a better player?
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, yeah. There's no question, because you rise to the occasion, whatever it is. So the best thing you can do is to play with people better than you, you know, and then, or you know, is good, whatever. But, you know, Dave, I can tell you an interesting story because we're both from St. Louis, and I got a gig with Maynard Ferguson. I went on the road, blah, 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 and he was sort of left back. He's like, what should I do? And anyway, he wound up going to Bridgeport and the East Coast thing in New York, and then he started fast forward a few years later, he started playing with Richard T, Anthony Jackson, I think it was Dave Sanborn. There was like a band that they had, you know, together. And they would start playing like quite a bit, and he played with Michelle Camilo, and he was playing with all these really good cats, and it really kept him on his toes, and he had to make it happen. He had to work really hard to play the gigs right. And when he came back to St. Louis, and I was back in St. Louis at that time, I heard him play for the first time in a while after playing with cats like that, and it was like, dude, it was like he was 50% better. Everything was more pro, his time was better, his feel was better. You know, when you play with Richard T and Anthony Jackson, you can't help but be better. That's why I created this, really, is because you kind of suck up inside the groove and you actually wind up being better.
Jay, tell everybody where they can get that.
Apple Store.
Apple Store. What's the name of the app?
Groove Clicks with an X.
Groove Clicks.
It's cheap. It's like $4 a month. You know, it's not even a big deal. But yeah, it's try it, free trial, whatever. Yeah, Apple Store. I know everyone wants it for Android. We're working on that. It's going to be a while for that one, but.
So yeah, if you're an Android user, you just still lose.
Well, you can buy a used iPad for $100 or something.
Does anybody have any questions for any of us? Yes.
Well, I got one thing you said about the Instagram drummers, Instagram musicians, how it's like, oh, they're so good. What you're not seeing is how many takes it took them to get that performance they posted. And also notice they're playing by themselves.
Yeah.
So it's like they've interacted with somebody. You can play in your bedroom for years. You get technical shots perfect. The first time you play with other people, you're lost. You're done because that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
It's like people aren't computers. Playing computers is one thing, but as soon as you get on stage with people, it's a whole other language you have to learn. So like practice, but also play with people.
I agree. You know what? It's really easy for me, like if I finish a lesson or something like that, I teach online, and you just leave stuff running, you know, the camera's running, and create some content. But for me, I'll just let stuff run for 10 minutes, and hopefully I can find 60 seconds that I even like of my own playing. You know, it's either that or people do 27 takes to find 60 seconds that they like, and that's what they post. But nothing's ever going to feel as good as playing with other musicians. That's what I love about the first time walking into the school, is that they have this room, and they have these other rooms, and they have these ensemble rooms, and everybody that comes here gets to play with other musicians, because that's the most important part. When I was a little kid, I didn't go, I want to grow up to be a TikTok drummer. There was no TikTok, but I want to play solos by myself. No, I was a little kid, and I wanted to be a Led Zeppelin and Kiss. You know, like this big. I wanted to play with other musicians.
Please play with other musicians. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's very kind.
You all do. What's the snare drum?
Snare drum. This is a aluminum snare drum, 6.5 by 14 aluminum Gretsch snare. I literally took it out of, like, on Friday, Thursday I was going to pack up the kit, and I've got 2 snares I'm sending out to a guy I know out in Orlando, and I thought this one needed work, and I just tuned it. I was like, oh, it works. Like I thought that something was wrong with the throw off, and I think something kind of is, it loosens up over time, so like it starts to get a bit ringy. But I just picked it up and I really liked how it sounded, so I'm glad you like the way it sounds as well.
What head?
It's a little bit of an assortment. I got Emperor X coated on the snare, and then an Ambassador up here on the 8, a Control Sound on the 10. Usually Diplomats, if you want that classic bark, you know, the In the Air Tonight thing, it's Diplomats on the 2 high concert toms. But because I've been playing these with Better Strangers in the more hard rock context, I just needed something a bit bulkier and heavier. And then the rest is just clear Emperors. And then on the kick, Power Stroke P4.
So you had a question?
Yeah, so just going back to like that, you know, not networking, but getting gigs, leveling up and everything. So like, everyone I know, including myself, every gig I've gotten, every little tour I've done has been by being in the scene and playing and getting one gig and then getting a gig from that on. But living in somewhere like Sarasota, and especially as you get older, you have a family and stuff, it's hard to always be doing that, especially if you have a day job, right? You can't get up till 2 in the morning, you got to be playing sober, you got to wake up at 6, 7 a.m., all that stuff. Is the audition even a real thing anymore? Because you know, like where they have 100 guys show up, and you know, there's only in big cities, or like, I can't find it. I mean, I've looked.
The audition is still a thing, but it's not like it was 20 years ago. And I have not heard of anyone doing a 100-person audition. Usually auditions, people are invited.
Right.
I'm privileged enough to represent Ray Luzier, who's the drummer in Korn. And when he got his gig with Korn, it was 20 drummers auditioning. And they got sent 5 songs to learn. This is a really good lesson. They got sent 5 songs to learn so the band could audition them over these 5 songs. Ray, being an overachiever, went out and purchased every Korn record, found every bootleg he could find, every live performance, and learned 40 songs. When he went for his audition and they did one song, they said, "What do you want to play next?" He said, "Aren't you bored playing these same 5 songs for all these drummers? Why don't you just play some other stuff?" And they said, "Well, what do you know?" And he said, "I know all of it." And they said, "Okay, let's give it a try." The remaining drummers didn't even get to audition, right? They looked at that level of preparation and Ray got the gig. So, but listen, man, it's hard, and I don't know enough about Sarasota to know how active its music scene is. My suspicion is not tremendously. But the internet will give you a source to contact with people, and you've got to be prepared to travel every now and again. You know, whether you go to, if you're a drummer, whether you go to PASIC in Indianapolis in November, or whether you go to the NAMM show with a view of making connections. This is a very small industry, much smaller than you think, right? Everybody knows everybody. And so getting your way in to be one of us, as opposed to one of them, it doesn't happen overnight, right? You don't build a career by slapping down a monolith in the ground, you build it up brick by brick. And it's the same with connectivity, and it's the same with networking. So you just gotta work on that network. And in the meantime, get the reputation for being on time, prepared, sober, professional, on time. Did I mention on time? On time's pretty important. Sober is pretty important.
Damn, it's so
Yes.
Yes.
What do you all do to mentally prepare yourself before a gig?
That's a good question. I'm going to let Jay and Nick answer that because I have to mentally prepare myself before court these days. That's all I have to do.
That's a great question. For me, it depends on, you know, the luxury that you have available to you. So I've done nice tours where you get a nice backstage, you maybe get a little drum room. So for that, it's like I like to, you know, spend maybe an hour before showtime, get changed, and then I put on my metronome, get my practice pad and my kick pad. And I go through my rudiments, go through grooves, you know, try to create. Sometimes I get, you know, it feels like you can get a bit stuck in just doing the same rudiments every day, so I try to kind of keep it fresh and interesting. Exactly, that's before I found out about this, because honestly, it gets a bit depressing where you're just like, you know, double strokes.
Exactly.
You know, absolutely, I get, you know. And But I also think that time, half of it has been for actual preparation for like your limbs, but a big part of it has been like a mental, like kind of a mental stimulation of starting to separate everything, putting the pieces together, rather than just literally warming up the arms and stuff. You, Jay?
You know, I'd actually never heard the question. I'm trying to figure out what it was.
What do you do to prepare for a gig?
Oh, I drink heavily. I honestly, so I don't want to get off on a tangent, but seriously, I literally changed my whole playing, like leaps and bounds, because I learned to do one thing, and very few people talk about this, but I learned to imagine playing. So when I'm not at a keyboard, when I'm just doing something else, driving, shower, whatever you're doing, you know, in my mind, it never stops. It doesn't stop. And it's an affliction. There are times when it's like, damn it, shut up. But for the most part, it's great because I'm singing lines in my mind. Like right now, I'm not even touching the keyboard, but I'm just thinking. And so what I'm doing is learning the synapse formation that is the same one when you actually play, right? But in my mind, I'm like, and I'm almost even moving my fingers. So the same connections are happening without the keyboard. And what that means is that I can practice 24/7. And I do. I literally wake up in the middle of the night and I've still got this shit going on in my brain. It's like, no wonder I can't sleep. But so if you can imagine yourself doing it, and I mean really like, you know, like a meditative state, but just really close your eyes and really imagine doing it and let that sort of connection start. Oh, that's amazing. So that's how I prepare for pretty much everything. To be honest, so like I don't sit down. I mean, unfortunately, you know, in concerts and gigs and stuff, they rarely have a keyboard backstage, you know, and we never had one. Well, actually, on the Buffett tour once, we did have a keyboard in the bus, but generally, no, I don't get to do that. I'll tell you one thing that doesn't work: all of my jokes about drinking. No, like we got with a Weckel gig when we were on tour, especially in Europe, where there's sometimes no time. You know, you're just rushing and rushing. Before you know it, it's like, oh, ready to play. But often what they do is they take you, like the promoter will take you out for dinner before the gig. And I always, every time, all of us were like, can we do it after the gig, please, not before? Because you're sitting there in Italy, and the food is the greatest thing ever. You know, and it's like, my God, it's the best pasta I've ever had. You know, and there's a carafe of Chianti, you know, on the table. You're like, oh, all right, I'll have one. You know, and then before you know it, it's like the gig is, you just don't have your reflexes, you know. So I just say that's one thing I don't. In fact, I don't even eat certain foods before the gig for that reason.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm looking at the time right here.
Yeah, we've got.
I am gonna wrap up questions right now, but we'll be around. I promise you come out. If you got questions for me, come find me. I'm gonna stand at the back because I want you all to hear some music. But I was just talking. This is a marvelous facility. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna do a master's class on what you need to know to survive in the music industry. So we're going to talk about copyright and publishing and royalties and performance and all those other things. And hopefully you can come and come to that. But in the meantime, thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks Dave, thanks Nick, thanks Jay, thanks Rob. And I'm going to let these good folks amaze you with some music. And thanks very much.
We're going to play a little bit. And yeah, we'll be hanging out as we're breaking down. And if you've got questions, also, there's a bunch of drumsticks and drum heads and t-shirts. And treat it like Halloween. Don't take the whole bowl. Leave enough for everybody. You know, help yourself and find something there. I do want to, before we just kind of play it, I'm not sure what we're going to do. We didn't really rehearse anything. I want to again thank Music Compound and Jenny and Alyssa for having this thing, having us. I'll be back to do something else at the end of this music masterclass series and get around more. You know, I love what you're giving back to the community and what you're doing for the community. And it's something, how do you not want to be involved in this? I mean, if you're a musician or want to be a musician, this is the hang. This is the place to come and hang. But also, thank you, Nick, for coming out here. We finally did this after hey man, we should do a clinic. Yeah. Hey man, we should do a clinic. Yeah. Also, this is Rob Sullivan, by the way, who's very involved with the Groove Clips and has a record label, and somebody else who's just up there, very highly integrated in the music industry. And thank you, Jay.
And he's, just think about Rob, he's playing this thing called a Zen drum.
Yes.
Which was sort of, I think, fostered by Future Man, what's his first name? Roy, that's right, Roy Wood. And the two of them have actually played together, and I've heard it, and it's pretty badass, really interesting.
So we're gonna struggle from hearing each other.
Yeah.
I'm in controller.
Oh, you don't have anything? Yeah. We don't have a wedge for you. I don't know. What is this? Can you hear that? We could play down with this. Let me start over because the one is in a different place. field. Did you hear the song I was playing? I don't think I could. I was going. Anybody catch that? Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. I think it was like too fast, right? Probably more like 112. We can't hear it. This is anyway. And Dave Stark. Yay! Now a dance. Right, you said you were going to dance. No?
You have a roadie, just
Yeah.
I think they're done.